This is the second lesson looking at the English language paper. Today we're going to be focusing on question 2. So I've put this screen up at first just to remind you of the amount of marks that the question is worth, but also of the timings for this. Remember what is really important about the English language paper. You are not just being smart. This is about being exam smart as well. Now, what we're going to be talking through today will probably take you more than the 12 minutes you're allocated to begin with, but that's absolutely fine. The more important thing for you to do is know what are the non-negotiable things to do in this question, and also the traps to avoid as well, because we often see similar patterns emerging with this question. Please make sure when you're doing the work with this that you're writing things down on pen and paper, but also look in the description for this video below where you'll find a link to some useful resources to be able to help you out with this. Do pause the video as and when you feel the need to as well to be able to write things down, and obviously send me questions through on Show My Homework if you are stuck on anything in particular. So, Paper 1, question 2, what exactly do you have to do? Here is an example question. Have a read of that for 30 seconds. So the important things to write down from this. Again, this is looking at very specific lines of the text. So like question 1, where you have to look at the first few lines, this will look at probably the next few lines. And what you are looking to analyze here is analyzing language. Now, what we mean by language is a lot of what you've already done with analyzing English literature. So we're looking out for things that make us things that help us picture something, things like verbs, things like similes, metaphors, alliteration. All of those are examples of language. How are they making us feel something in particular? You will notice at the bottom of this question are 3 bullet points. You could include the writer's choice of words and phrases, language features and techniques, and sentence forms. What I would say is if you see this on the exam paper, cross this out. This is actually, I find, more of a hindrance, not useful, than it is useful. Because what students tend to do is they write 1 paragraph about words and phrases, 1 paragraph about language features, and 1 paragraph about sentence forms. That will not help you score the marks that you need to do. Your analysis needs to be intertwined between these ideas rather than 1 paragraph on each. So ignore what you've got here. So, this is an example extract, a zoomed in version of the larger extract that you would have to analyze. As you will see the question here, how does the writer use language here to describe the effects of the weather? Now, a different question for a different exam paper might not be asking you to describe the effects of the weather. It might ask you to describe how a specific character or something like that. But it will always be asking you about language. And as we've said here, we're going to ignore the bullet points because actually they end up not being that useful. So, first thing that you need to do, you need to read this part of the extract, and you are going to look out for any particular phrases that stand out to you about the weather. If you can identify any techniques, fantastic, but that is not the be all and end all. What I suggest you do now is you pause the video, and on your copy of this, if you've got one in front of you, you circle 3 phrases that stand out to you in particular. I would suggest you pause the video now and complete that task. So what we're now going to do is I'm going to show you how you should and you should not be looking at your analysis for this. So if we're looking at the effects of the weather, I picked out the phrase, the coach trembled and swayed. Well done if you managed to pick that one out. Now, with this, we need to be thinking about if we know any techniques associated with it, fantastic, but ultimately that's not the most important thing. What's more important is what are the effects of these particular words? Why are the words trembled and swayed particularly useful language? Here is an example of a bad bit of analysis. The personification shows that the coach is acting like a human. Now, yes, it has identified the technique there, but ultimately it hasn't been specific because every single version of personification shows that something is acting like a human, but that doesn't do anything in particular for this. Rather, how about this for some analysis? The personification shows that the coach is scared, as you often tremble when scared. Do you see the difference between the two? One just gives me a definition of personification. That's not good. The other is specific about what the language here uses. So what I would like you to do is pause the video again, and I would like you to do the same sort of analysis as this with the other two quotations that you have analysed and picked out. I would suggest you pause the video now. So, two further examples that you could look at. A drunken man, between the high wheels like a drunken man. Now, this is a simile, but as we've got here, the simile is used to compare the coach to a drunken man. Again, not very effective because all it is doing, like with the first example, is it just tells us what a simile is. A better version of this perhaps could be, the simile is used to make the coach seem out of control and unpredictable, perhaps even violent. We have said what the idea of a drunken man specifically does, rather than just saying what a simile is. And for the third example, the wheels of the coach creaked and groaned. Another example there. Here, we've used an onomatopoeia. Check the spelling of onomatopoeia. And a bad example would tell us, here, it shows what the coach sounds like. But think in particular, if something creaks or groans, how is it feeling? How is it acting? That is what we're looking for the effect. And here is a better example. It's struggling through the harsh weather, and its condition has gotten worse since the opening paragraph. High marks will be scored for this question if you manage to see how an idea develops over the course of this question. Do you see how it started by trembling, but now it is groaning? It was scared, and now it is struggling as a result. So you've got three pieces of analysis that you have analysed here, which you would then need to work out how to write them up effectively. Here is your mark scheme for paper 1, question 2. Now, if we're aiming for a grade 4 or 5, we need to be aiming for half marks as a minimum in this question. I'd love for you to be able to get higher, but ultimately, if we're aiming for a grade 4, we need to be getting at least 4 marks out of the 8 that we could possibly get. And in this mark scheme, we're looking for 3 things. You talking about the effect of language, so making sure that you are saying what the specific words are talking about. Giving me some quotations, I would suggest a minimum of 3. And then using subject terminology. What that means is identifying your techniques like personification, simile, and onomatopoeia, as we have identified before. What I'm going to show to you now, just before we finish off, some phrases that you should absolutely avoid using, and some phrases that you should use in order to help you score at least those 4 marks. It has an effect on the reader is not a phrase that you should use because every piece of language will have an effect on the reader, so it means nothing. Similarly, the reader can imagine it in their head or anything like that, can conjure a picture. They don't mean anything because if the writer has not done that, they're not doing their job effectively. Equally, these last 3 phrases should be avoided. Drawing the reader in means nothing. We should be avoiding saying, I know this, because we want to try and be more sophisticated in our writing, and you are not rating what they are doing. So none of these phrases should come near your analysis because all it will do is give you make your answer vague, and you'll score probably a maximum of 2 marks out of the 8. Instead, here are some phrases that you could use instead. You've got specific quotations that you're talking about, picking out of the techniques. Make sure that you're zooming in on key words and analysing those. These 2 ones are put in red because they're slightly more sophisticated. Because the idea of reinforcing means linking together your phrases. So you've done one bit of analysis on one of your quotations, but then you reinforce it with another one. That would be a great thing to be able to do there. And here we have the start of an answer. The writer writes the phrase, "The coach trembled and swayed," to highlight the power of the weather. The use of the personification shows the strength of the weather, as it has made even the coach, a non-living object, scared of it. This question, remember, you don't need to have loads of detail like an introduction or a conclusion. Just get straight on with your analysis, because as we've said, you've only got 12 minutes to answer this question. I hope you found this useful. Make sure that you're using these sentence starters when you write up your answer, and you're avoiding these as well. Have a go at using the analysis that we've done to write up an answer for it. I'm more than happy for you to send it through for us to be able to look through. Hope you found it useful. Thank you very much for watching.